This is Alan Minsky, Executive Director of PDA, and on today's call, I'm going to be joined by William Walter from the Steering Committee of Young Progressive Democrats of America. And William and I are just back from a trip to Washington, D.C. In my case, just back is somewhat absurd. I took an insanely early flight from National Airport in D.C. and had a marvelous conversation with a member of of course, the Airline Workers Union about the history of indigenous rights in America. But that's, boy, I'm really off subject here. But the point is I just flew in and arrived, and I'm going to be talking about our experiences on Capitol Hill. William and I visited no less than 8 offices. And then over the weekend, I went to a conference of Jewish Voice for Peace, probably the largest ever held conference for, Palestinian rights, for addressing from a progressive perspective, certainly led by Jews, from a progressive perspective, addressing the crisis in Israel, Gaza, Palestine, et cetera. It was a phenomenal event. And actually, in the course of that weekend that was held in Baltimore, I was able to meet with two other people in Baltimore, live in Baltimore, both related to the bills that William and I were presenting on Capitol Hill. Now, one always takes successful events in one's life with a grain of salt, and everybody listening right now should as well. But from my point of view, going into this week of very important high-level meetings where we as PDA were basically presenting close to almost a unified legislative package that is taken as a whole, an effort to redefine the Democratic Party, to have the progressive wing of the party consolidate around a particular set of bills and framings to present to the American public. And they were all received very well. Now, because of the nature of the dynamics of even the interactions of our strongest allies up on Capitol Hill, while I'll certainly be open about all the offices we met with and tell something of how things went, as William will as well, it's also the case that until something is actually introduced, the sort of code is to be not specific or too specific about the nature of the bills. One bill is certainly already clearly greenlit. There were a couple bills that we were going to present that it's sort of, and one of which actually we'll speak about rather openly, a tricky thing to introduce and when they might get reintroduced. I knew going in was sort of a question mark, but I felt that the bill had to be raised as an issue. But these are the dynamics of Capitol Hill. And so when I'm not being very specific or precise on those details, that's why certainly the people who introduce the bills always want the opportunity to make the full presentation of the bill themselves when they do so. And, neither William or I are actually members of Congress. And so, as you can imagine, though, I will say this, any one of these bills going forward, and there really are about 10 in number, some of them very large, some of them, at least one of them, very small, that the PDA Congressional Liaison Program will be launched in full regalia to advocate for the bills. And by the way, I would say every single one of these bills are the nature of their content has been discussed on these calls, and there's pretty much consensus within PDA to support all of these, though not within the full Democratic caucus, but definitely majority within the Progressive Caucus, if not going beyond the totality of the Progressive Caucus. One or two of the bills actually could even go beyond the Democratic Caucus with support, though, as we know, that's largely not done these days in Washington. Now, before I introduce William, which I will approximately in about 10 minutes, we'll hear from Mike Fox with our PDA to-dos. Donna Smith is not with us today, but I should say that there is a brand new episode of Positively Progressive that is now up online. And there's the general link to the Positively Progressive website. And the specific link to the new episode is coming momentarily. And it's a great dialogue with a Colorado-based union organizer. And this will maybe people will recall this from a few years ago. Actually, is a person who was on our national call about the political situation in um, Puerto Rico. So he's somebody that I've done work with before, but Luis lives in Colorado, where he is an SEIU organizer, and so it's going to be it is a great conversation, and it ends talking a little bit about his having been on the PDA Town Hall about Puerto Rico previously, and of course we will no doubt hear from him again in the near future, Luis. But please, everybody, um, click on this new episode of Positively Progressive, share with your friends on social media, share the whole project with your friends on social media. Donna does amazing interviews. She does a brilliant job, not only of making strong political points, I mean, essential and strong political points in episode after episode. She's just a very, very excellent interviewer. Really, you get to know the person who she's talking to. And this is certainly the case with Luis on this latest installment. And by the way, there's a new installment should be out again next week. So we're rolling out these episodes of Positively Progressive and let everybody know about it. Now, of course, before I bring William in, before I throw to Fox, I'll say a few words about the JVP conference that I attended, because obviously William and I will be talking about our joint project from when we were in Washington, D.C. together. And the first thing that I want to say, obviously, I'm Jewish, self-identified. I actually have a very strong connection to a large number of aspects of Jewish culture, the religion even, and even though I'm, agnostic to atheistic, highly secular, I'm not bar mitzvahed. My father was not bar mitzvahed. My father's first language was Yiddish, and he was not bar mitzvahed. And so we're quite secular Jewish lineage in our family. However, there's a little bit more than my father. Actually, I got involved after college, actually, in doing things like trying to understand, the Talmudic Judaism, the Judaism that's developed by rabbis originally in Mesopotamia, but then around the diaspora in the years actually after the expulsion from Israel, so after, say, the time of Christ. And a lot of people who are not that familiar with Judaism don't even know that, Judaism is more than just the Old Testament. Well, really, in religious teachings, it's much more about the lessons that are learned after, as it were, year zero, as it were. And they build off of the Torah and the books of the Old Testament. That they're sort of for me, as being largely agnostic, sort of the mythological anchor to the ethical and philosophical teachings of Talmudic Judaism. So I'm really, really connected to Jewish self-identity. And I just was I felt that there were over 2,000 attendees, largely Jewish, not exclusively. And the ethical tradition in Judaism is so strong, and to be in a room that large with that many Jews who I feel are so fully committed to an ethical worldview was really beautiful, very empowering. And the speeches by Naomi Klein and Angela Davis and Robin D.G. Kelly and so many others were just incredible. Cori Bush, by the way, was there this morning. I had to leave earlier and so I couldn't see Cori. Rashida Tlaib. William and I were in her company literally 3 hours before she took the stage at the JVP opening plenary. And Rashida and I had joked when we saw each other that we were going to be late and that Beth Miller from JVP would be mad at us. But having said all that, obviously the event is cast in tragedy, and unfolding an ongoing tragedy, and a tragedy that does, can be said to be a reality for the Jewish people, and the realities of anti-Semitism in our society are not, and around the world, are not lost on people. I'm not going to really opine on Israel and Gaza and all that right now, but I will say this one thing. I think the kind of things that I know American Jews are experiencing, they are really exacerbated by the Israeli government's behavior. That is right now the thing that is catapulting the sort of wave of anti-Semitism that we're experiencing, because people associate Jews with Israel, and they associate Israel with the mass slaughter of people. And so, look, obviously, we want peace in the region. We want to do everything we can in our power as PDA to produce peace in the region. And organizations, from the progressive pacifist wing of J Street, even if not now, and yes, most fundamentally, JVP. This is a great and essential ally of PDA. It was an incredible conference, and I believe all of the plenaries will be online in the coming time. And there were some really, really incredible speeches there. So that was my report back from JVP, and we will continue to work with them in solidarity to try to, again, bring an end to the disaster that's unfolding there, to combat anti-Semitism, to combat Islamophobia, and to support the justice, human rights, and the right to land of the Palestinian people. So with that, Mike Fox, what do we have for our PDA to-dos for this week?
And can you hear me, Alan?
Yes. And excellent. What Stephen Spitz just put in the chat, I completely agree with. Thank you, Steve.
And so, gang, to-dos. To-do number one, as always, revel in the fact that you're surrounded by people who get it here. Each and every Sunday, 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific. We come together here to show solidarity with each other, to build community, to buttress each other's efforts. And with that kind of idea of solidarity, let's keep the comments in the chat positive and respectful of each other. First and foremost, there are sometimes differences that we have, no question, but the purpose of this call is not to identify differences. The purpose of this call is to bring us all together, okay? Bottom line. So let's all remember that we're building a solid community here together with its foundation in respect for human rights wherever those humans are, okay? And you all make me healthier by being here each and every week. It's literally therapy for me to see you guys all here, and gals, excuse me, all here on a Sunday. So thank you for being here. To-do number two, please do take notes. We're going to be covering quite a few to-dos throughout this entire program, so you want to make sure you've got them. I'll be tossing into the chat a couple of immediate ones. One based on the colleague sign-on letter from Representatives Bera and Carbajal, asking the Israeli ambassador to promote additional humanitarian aid going into Gaza. So a copy of that letter is in the chat. And please do contact your congressperson about that. Another quick contact Congress is the crazy vote that took place in the Judiciary Committee about, sure, we can deport citizens. So I'll be tossing into the chat the link to the committee. And if you live in a district of one of those Republicans, please do let them know that in this country, we do not deport people, number one, without due process. And number two, we don't deport citizens. Full stop. Okay. Thank you for that. All right. Our substantial time goal for this week is phone bank. Go to pdamerica.org/volunteer. Give us an hour. The phone bank played a substantial role in the wonderfully successful rollout of expanded and improved Medicare for All bill on Tuesday from Bernie and Pramila and Debbie Dingle. Alan was there for that as well. He and William. So y'all might touch on that as well while you're giving us your remarks. Over 100 original co-sponsors, bam, and the largest number, I believe, somebody shoot me down if I'm wrong here, but I'm thinking it's the largest number ever of Senate signups for as original co-sponsors, and we actually have our good PDA activist out of New Mexico, Laura Lucero, is literally in DC right now, and she and I were going back and forth about how she's going to have the great job of going to her two senators' offices, both of whom are on board now, and just doing a high five and a thank you, something that sometimes we aren't as good at in our world on occasion. We're real good at identifying the problems and yelling at them, and that's our job, bottom line. But at the end of the day, always good for us to show some love and solidarity with those who are on board with us. So I will get you if you want a list of those co-sponsors, you can just I don't have the link right here in front of me. Email me at mikefox@pdamerica.org, and we can get you involved in doing those thank yous or those spank calls. We've had a goodly number of folks deliver letters to Congress, more of them coming on that bill. So kudos to all who have been active in that regard. Likewise, the phone team was involved in the big May Day events across the country, over 1,300 of them. And everybody mark your calendar for June, is it 14th? Yeah, June 14th, the same day as Trump's insane Führer Fest that he's planning for the big parade. Well, there's going to be counter rallies across the country on that day. So please do mark your calendar. We'll get you more very specific information on that in upcoming calls. I should have a lot more to say about that on our Thursday night campaign to victory call. By the way, every Thursday, 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific. Okay. So there's our brief to-dos. The other, that's from a time standpoint. From a treasure standpoint, again, our goal here today is let's get 100% solidarity with everyone, even if it's just $1. That's great. No worries. I'm not talking about big dollars at this point. What we are talking about is solidarity. That's all. Just toss in whatever you can. And by doing that, you are inspiring not only the people who are doing the work, likewise the other people who are volunteering, and we all just build community in that endeavor. So anything you can do is greatly appreciated. We'll be back at the top of the hour to see where we're at on our goals. And back to you, Alan.
Thank you so much, Mike. And one final thought I want to say about the JVP conference. It struck me very much that somewhat, not in any way a precise parallel, it reminded me of the abolitionists meetings in the decades leading up to the Civil War. That, as my daughter is about to take the AP U.S. history test, and Robin D.G. Kelly, a great radical American historian, was there. And like Harvey J. Kaye, emphasizing the necessity of reclaiming American history for the left and the great, incredible struggles of people throughout American history for justice. And this really, the JVP conference of 2025, I think really fits in there. And to end on this note, Amy Goodman was the MC of the first plenary that was a roundtable discussion. The opening plenary had speeches, including from people who were unable to get into the United States because they were not granted a visa. But this was a roundtable discussion led by Amy Goodman, who was, people who know Amy Goodman's work, as most of us do, you could not have a better host for such a roundtable discussion. But Democracy Now! And JVP are undoubtedly two of the most vulnerable 501c3s in the country to the Trumpian, I call it a counter-revolutionary coup. Just, everything that's transpiring with the Trumpian crisis. And certainly myself as executive director of Progressive Democrats of America, and I also will try to persuade the decision-making process of PDA to be prepared to stand in absolute full solidarity to support these organizations when they're under attack, which again, tragically and sadly, I don't think anybody would be surprised to speculate about that as possibly forthcoming. So we will definitely stand with these organizations, and I think they are absolutely exemplary practitioners of free speech in our time. So, as Mike mentioned, not only myself, but William Walter was at the Medicare for All rollout, which was actually emceed by one Bernie Sanders with Pramila Jayapal and Debbie Dingle and about seven other speakers. And Bernie hung out the whole time, introducing everybody. From Mark Diemenstein, who we made a connection with, the U.S. Postal Workers organizer, and he's going to be on a town hall soon. Sorry, the head of the Postal Workers Union, and representatives from PNHP. Rob Weissman was there from Public Citizen, and there, and in the audience, Alex Lawson from Social Security Works, William, myself, loads of nurses, an incredibly beautiful scene. And that opened up our visit. And then we had, I can't quite get the sequence correct here, William. Maybe your notes are more clear in front of you. The first office we visited was Ro Khanna, and we met with Ro directly, and we have big plans with Ro Khanna for the introduction of legislation. And I know it was actually early the next day that we met with Pramila Jayapal's office. We met in total at seven congressional offices and one Senate office, which actually ended up being our longest visit, I think, was in Bernie Sanders' office, where Bernie was there and Jane was there. Um, and we met at length with Misty Rebeck, the chief of staff of Bernie Sanders, who's just an absolutely phenomenal organizer activist mind who Misty's one of those people you meet and she wants to know people's backgrounds. So, William got to meet her and tell Misty about his background. And I did the same in a long conversation, even, which was just me and Misty initially. And, she comes from small town rural Iowa. And I don't think I've ever really dealt at length with anybody on Capitol Hill who both simultaneously is working every day for the people, for the left, for a progressive vision of American society, because that is a just and sane vision of American society. That is a majoritarian vision of society, but with an acute awareness of the real barriers that we have to overcome. And as great as the progress we have made, thanks to PDA and the drafting of Bernie Sanders and his again being the most popular politician in the country, um, the public policy has not been passed that needs to be passed. We haven't made the transformation we need to make. And so it becomes an effort with PDA as a significant organization, all of these offices as significant components of what needs to be set in motion, and a latent population across the United States that knows they want social change. And how do we get it done? And what role can putting out a positive template of legislation play in that? So the other offices we met with, there was Jamie Raskin's office we met with through the judiciary staff. We met with Ilhan Omar and her primary coordinator on the student debt docket. I'm mentioning that one specifically. And again, Rashida Tlaib's office we met with. So that's six, and I'm gonna
Greg.
we're forgetting, and they're not. It's just was such a whirlwind of meetings, and everyone was so important.
Greg as well, Alan. Greg.
Greg Kassar, of course, the head of the Progressive Caucus, and then Jan Schakowsky's office.
Yes.
And that's the other bill that I'll mention straight away. The long-standing from two Congress ago's PDA-led piece of legislation that hasn't really adequately been featured on these town halls, but will be soon, called the Manufacturing Renaissance Act, is already in motion as the second, and we'll look for support in the Senate as well. And this is a piece of legislation that just you want to reboot U.S. manufacturing. When we introduced this bill initially in the 117th Congress, two Congresses ago, manufacturing was certainly not being spoken about in the general political discourse, nor was it spoken about by many progressives at all. And now, of course, and look, Trump has played a role in this. The task and the goal of achieving a manufacturing rebirth in the United States is front and center in the national political conversation. Well, Trump's ideas about it, like most of his ideas, are somewhere between horrible and wrong-headed in the approach. And in this case, both. Because, of course, while he may talk about the pain of the working class, we all know that his vision of a renewed U.S. manufacturing is not a unionized manufacturing workforce, and it's not a high-wage manufacturing workforce with strong benefits. Put those all together, that's sort of called high-road manufacturing. Our bill is for high-road manufacturing and addresses the realities of how to attain it. And that, the Manufacturing Renaissance Act, should be out sometime. Oh, it's in process sometime in the next 2 months. That's the meeting with John Chakowski's office. A great meeting. And that office does incredible things. And the other bill that I will certainly talk about specifically was the bill that was introduced again 2 Congresses ago with PDA in the lead, along with the Debt Collective and Freedom to Prosper at the time, which is the Universal Student Debt Cancellation Bill. And a lot of the progressive Democrats have had a lot of pushback because the Republicans, as we all know, had these talking points about universal student debt cancellation. That, again, those are the elitists looking out for the elite. Well, of course, that's a crock. Most of the people who carry massive amounts of student debt are from families who can't afford to send their kids to college with the bills as they really are. It's not the elites. They can afford the incredible tranche of money that goes towards going to college. And however, while right now there's been pushback, including from the moderate Democrats, and of course we need to be in alliance with the moderate Democrats to defeat the fascists. PDA and I myself will never lose sight of that. But we know there's a big push going on inside the Democratic Party between the progressives and the moderates. It's almost more open and apparent than I've ever seen it been since I've been here. And the student debt load is about to drop like an anvil on the head of tens of millions of Americans. And so in talking to Omar's office about the reintroduction of this bill, there's a sense that there will really be an appetite for this, not only among the general public, but back within the halls of Congress within a few months. So we're poised, again, PDA to lead on that front. College for all was brought up in numerous offices, but most specifically with Pramila Jayapal and with her chief of staff, fantastic chief of staff, Lila Pomerantz. And I am actually, and you may all not know this, I'm the member of I'm a non-voting member of the Steering Committee of Higher Education Labor United, which is the umbrella organization of unions that represent graduate students and lower faculty, like lecturers, et cetera, sometimes also, assistant professors, et cetera, on college campuses. And it's a great organization. It's been brought together with support by a number of unions. And I, in many ways, am their I'm their Virgil to themselves as Dante, helping them understand the ropes within the halls of Congress and helping them get footing as they coordinate with these offices. So I was a liaison for them to Pramila's office and Bernie's office about the reintroduction of College for All. They're also interested in supporting student debt cancellation as well. So that came up in a number of offices. So I have to be a little coy going forward. But let me just say, without naming bills or what they may in the end be, the 21st Century Economic Bill of Rights was front and center in our discussions with offices. The Rural New Deal was more subtextual because working with the offices like Greg Casars, who oversees the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and I met with the executive director of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, there's nobody even remotely attached to that legislation, prospective legislation, but everybody agrees that the document that PDA authored, that Dave Alba and I authored, though the primary author, if the concept was ours to introduce it, which it was initially, the primary author, of course, is Anthony Flacaveno from the Rural Urban Bridge Initiative. And we are looking for the right office to introduce this. And tragically, in our society, even though rural and small town America is not prospering economically, the Democratic Party and the moderate Democrats have largely abandoned rural and small town America. And the Republican Party, this is like a one-party state rather, in all these vast geographic expanses of America. It's not prospering. People know it's not prospering. Now there's parts of small town America that are still very beautiful. Rural America, of course, all immensely beautiful, but the people are not doing well economically. The communities are, social services are poor, economies are in distress, main streets are shredded, and of course, there's a lot of other endemic signs of social problems across small town and rural America that we know about. And progressives, we believe, have the best solutions. So people were doing cartwheels over the idea of the introduction of something along the lines of a rural New Deal proposal. And then lastly, we had a very special meeting with Jamie Raskin's office. And Darren, again, this is vague because it needs to be, but make the Constitution whole again. And there's, in our minds, no better office to lead on that than Jamie Raskin's a constitutional scholar, longtime ally of PDA. Apparently was at our founding event back in 2004 or nearby, if not at it. And as a young man then, and I suppose I can go to specifics. We also did, of course, per our work we do with Harvey J.K., talk to Jamie Raskin's office about something that he wants to partner with us on, which is honoring Tom Paine. And again, per Donna Smith and Positively Progressive, reclaiming American history for progressives as we go into our 250th anniversary. My partner is calling me right now. So, William, why don't you pick up from there, give your reflections on our trip that we had together, and I will be pulled away and back in a minute. I promise to be back in 60 seconds, William. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. So what I found most inspiring was obviously we visited a number of elected officials, 7 different House reps offices and 1 Senate office, but every single one of those officials were not only excited about the work that PDA is doing, has done, and will continue to do, but was insistent upon the fact that they will be by our side as we continue going forward, because PDA has taken the lead on a number of progressive policies, both at the national level and as we're working through some of our state groups. I was immensely impressed by just how much respect they had for the long, successful history of PDA, not just for the work, as I mentioned before, not the work that we're continuing to do, but it's very clear that PDA is well known on Capitol Hill, that PDA is looked to as an ally on Capitol Hill, and that PDA is expected to, and expectations can be a lot of pressure, but I think there's no better organization. I think there's no organization that has stronger infrastructure that is not more prepared for this moment and capable of handling that responsibility and those expectations than Progressive Democrats of America. It was actually my first time in Washington, D.C., so we took about an hour or two on the first night before meetings, and Alan got to do a little bit of tour guiding, let's call it. We swung by the Lincoln Memorial, and being able to see firsthand these powerful institutions of the United States, how they function, and how they behave on a day-to-day basis, kind of reaffirmed, at least for me, why we do this work. That America is worth fighting for, because this is the only country where we can advocate for the kind of progressive policies we know are required for a just and sustainable future and for a healthy economic opportunities for all Americans. But also, this country was built on these progressive values and on the work that working class individuals have been putting forth day in and day out, year after year, decade after decade. I'm so excited to be able to continue on this work with great organizers like Alan and with all of you at PDA. But it was just inspiring is the word that keeps coming to mind, because there were a number of May Day events as well on May 1st. Unfortunately, Alan had to leave already, so I went and visited those events. But one of the large May Day rallies at Freedom Plaza joined in with a picket line of striking workers at the Willard Intercontinental Hotel that was going on. It was a very powerful display of solidarity and the type of community organizing that we preach on a daily basis being utilized in practice. That was a moment that, of course, I had to document, and I sent it to all of our PDA team to make sure we had video evidence of it. But that really reaffirmed why we do the work that we do on a daily basis.
And I have to say, too, it was absolutely fantastic to be with William. First of all, it was amazing to be there. And, obviously, when I was your age, William, I didn't have the experience of walking halls of Congress. And first of all, it was great to have you there. We had Mike Hersh with us for the first day as well. And but also just to have that level of support to feel that, PDA was coming into the room as a team. And uh, yeah, I mean, the sense of a turning point in history where we don't know the future, we never do, but that the Democratic Party and the moderate wing of the Democratic Party, on the one hand, is trying to be adamant in insisting that it needs to be, the dominant faction of the party and remain the dominant faction of the party. But clearly, the Democratic base and the general public is open to ideas other than what has been presented by the dominant moderate faction of the Democratic Party. And the lead offices of the progressive leadership in Congress, which, of course, we didn't exhaust. We didn't visit Ayanna Pressley. We didn't visit Jeff Merkley over in the Senate. We didn't visit Ed Markey. We, of course, didn't visit Jim McGovern, who we love, and we are with him as his family is going through a difficult time. And there are many other exceptional progressive offices, but clearly Bernie Sanders is, and by the way, we didn't visit AOC's office, which I hope to do when I'm back in DC May 12th to 14th. And then I'll be actually walking the halls with Hanya Jodit Barnes, who is the head of a very unique PDA chapter called PDA Middle East Alliances. And, but again, PDA, I think, just to say so everybody can hear on this call, certainly is central to the ongoing dialogue with progressives about the direction of the Progressive Caucus and progressivism in general as a political movement in the United States of America. And I did, when I was in Baltimore, meet with an exceptional person who's fully committed to what we work towards at PDA, Mike Darner. And if people don't know, the Congressional Progressive Caucus has a leader, currently Greg Casar. If you go back 3 Congresses ago, it had 2 leaders, which was the case for a while. And the great growth of the Progressive Caucus came with under Pramila Jayapal's leadership, with co-leadership from Mark Pocan, who, by the way, will be at the meeting in town that I'll be going and running off to in about, well, now under an hour. And then it became, for one Congress, they've decided to go to sole leadership with Pramila Jayapal. And now it's the exceptional young congressman from Austin, Texas, Greg Casar, who we met with in person. And he really was interested in the subcomponents of sort of sub-bills that would support the broad architecture of a rural New Deal, the broad architecture of a 21st century economic Bill of Rights. And I think it's correct that there are components of that, actually, especially on the rural New Deal, that could see passage because they are such strong and solid ideas, right? And so we're very excited to continue to work with those offices. But Mike Darner is actually the executive director of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and he's been in that role and does exceptional work, and so will almost certainly remain in that role for the time going forward. And he lives in the great city of Baltimore, where this JVP conference was held, and I had a great meeting with him. Obviously, a private meeting. I'm not going to go into detail and stuff, but great meeting in relationship to all that we're talking about. And so it's just exciting time for progressive Democrats of America. But with the subtext, right, William, of the horror show that Trump is. And we have to proceed with a positive vision. By the way, Pramila Jayapal had a very strong article in The Nation magazine on April 29th calling for the necessity of a positive vision. And one of the things we also committed to is if the third Reconstruction Act does get reintroduced by Pramila Jayapal, it was originally introduced by Barbara Lee, we will be supporting that again. It's a very general bill, too, and it'll be part of what we will, of course, be promoting. What was your sense, William, walking the halls of just, obviously you've never been up there before, but, this just insane political moment that we're in and how that all felt to you?
Well, for one, I had been warned of this ahead of time, both from you and from other friends of mine that have worked in DC, but I was genuinely surprised by how many individuals walking the halls were my age, if not younger. A sizable chunk of the staff, these are 25-year-olds and younger that are doing a significant amount of the work, at the Capitol. You know, we were able to go down and we had lunch at the cafeteria, which was also a very eye-opening experience that I think most Americans would not expect to see. It's very crowded, so you are sitting shoulder to shoulder with people who might have very different beliefs as you, who might work in offices that are diametrically opposed to your worldview. Alan and I had a fabulous conversation with a gentleman from it was the Maine Chamber of Commerce, I believe. But we were able to find common ground on talking baseball. We had mutual interest and mutual history in the sport of baseball, and it just kind of reaffirmed to me that at the end of the day, a lot of us want the same things: happy, healthy, thriving communities we can all be proud to call home. It's just, how do we get to that point? And that was, I think, the biggest revelation for me, particularly when we were meeting with Senator Sanders' staff, was that Misty, yourself, Mike, and I, we all reached the same conclusion. But, you know, to use the old math equation analogy, even if you find the right answer, not knowing how you found that answer makes it difficult to duplicate. And we have all of this energy, we have all of this momentum, and we have so many progressives that are inspired. We have an entire Democratic base that is clearly aligned with progressive ideology. How do we get them to take that next step? Because to, you know, full circle answer your initial question, it was clear that there is an extensive amount of anxiety in those halls. People are clearly frustrated. People are clearly scared. We heard from some of the elected officials we talked to specifically that, you know, they don't want to sugarcoat it. They're really, really worried about this moment we find ourselves in.
Right.
And you could take that in two different directions. Either A, analysis paralysis. You're too scared to function. It's too overwhelming and you shut down. Or B, you rise to the occasion. You rise to the moment. And you understand that what we do today and what we do over the next 2 years will not only define American history, but potentially the future of all civilization on this planet. And we know that we have the numbers behind our beliefs because we're hearing it in these offices. We're hearing it from staffers that we're listening in when we're listening into their conversations on elevators, when we're casually striking up conversation with people that are walking past us, either at the Capitol itself or in restaurants around the Capitol or whatever. We know that we are on the right side of history. We just need to be able to leverage the bodies in our corner to be able to enact true structural change. And I believe that PDA's platform has the ability to do so if we're able to get enough support from the Democratic Party and from other democratic institutions across the country.
Yeah, and by the way, you probably, I was a little bit of a broken record in some of those meetings because I told myself I wanted as many of them as possible to remember to say that I feel that the PDA template of public policy is a majoritarian political set of beliefs in the United States. I do want to say too, I should let everybody know, including you, William, everybody on the call might have noticed I moved rooms. When I tend to do that, often my connection drops. So be prepared to pick up for me if my connection drops. It's been a little shaky here and there. I don't know why that is. The Spectrum's monopoly of Wi-Fi in Highland Park, California, or the weakness of my computer.
And Alan, could I add one thing quick based on a comment I saw in the chat? Teresa, we spoke specifically with Jan about that because Alan introduced me as Young Progressive Democrats of America, and Jan made a joke. Oh, this is my young team. She was flanked by a number of her interns as they were walking back to the office. And I casually mentioned, fabulous. We need to get more young people to vote. And Jan correctly observed, well, it's not just young people. Old people are suffering, or older Americans are suffering right now too. These Trump cuts are hitting all of us. And she was exactly right. So it's not a generational divide. Young people need to do a better job of voting. But at the same time, a lot of our parents, our grandparents, fellow elderly Americans, all of us are really feeling the heat from the Trump administration right now. And all of us need to be able to come together and work together if we want to have the kind of unified front with enough power to offer true resistance that, frankly, I don't think we are seeing as of right now from the Democratic Party. And I think a lot of the officials we talked to, Alan, would agree with that statement because we essentially had that conversation with them.
Yeah, and we also, I think one of the things I learned too, especially in the final congressional office meeting, is to approach everything with humility too, because there are people, we have some great progressive leaders. And I hope everybody on this call recognizes how beautiful a soul Rashida Tlaib is. By the way, she spoke before Angela Davis did. on that opening plenary of speakers. So she got there as I got there too. Right, we raced up to Baltimore and got there in time. And what a beautiful soul. But I do my damnedest to think through these issues as deep and as hard as I can, and I devour commentaries and essays, and yet her, I'm not going to go into detail again here. It certainly was a private conversation, but her detail on some of the power dynamics up on the Hill, I think were real. They were accurate, and I didn't understand them till I heard them from her. And so
They were very insightful too, Alan, because it seems obvious in hindsight now that she has mentioned
right,
it,
I
because
know.
elected officials, these are human beings. We often simply see them as a name on a note card that gets sent to your mailbox, or the face of a TV commercial, or a social media profile posting things in regards to what their office is doing. But these are real human beings that deal with real human being struggles and real human being relationships, even amongst the progressive left. And being able to kind of play, I hate to say play the game because of the negative connotations, but being able to work these relationships and expand upon the goodwill and trust and honesty that have been built over years of successes through organizations such as PDA is going to be absolutely imperative if we want to keep this movement rolling.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And I suppose we'll, since I don't have that much time, and I've got to run off to this event. And by the way, it is that it's a fundraiser for the LGBTQ plus caucus, which of course, and this was also something that came up quite a bit at JVP, the necessity of solidarity with with that community broadly understood, and particularly with the more even more vulnerable and directly attacked components of that community right now are so real. But it's of course also true that I think about half of the congressional members who will be at this are maybe not members of the Progressive Caucus, at least a few of them aren't. And it will remain PDA's approach to always approach all the people in Congress with a very civil approach, with certainly entering into every conversation, every lobbying effort with the idea that we have a great idea, we think it's the right idea, and we're going to persuade people that we think it's the right idea. And certainly with all members of the Democratic Party right now, we obviously see what is a stark divide. And this to me was sort of in the fabric of the whole time we were up there. That at this hour, it's sad to say, one party is supporting the U.S. Constitution, maybe not as strongly in some cases. Actually, yes, certainly not as strongly in some cases they need to. Certainly, there's been some real cynicism expressed by some of the more conservative members of the Democratic caucus about almost seemingly allow Trump to do damage to things because that will be a catastrophe and it will lead to a Democratic victory in 2026. But clearly, one party is supporting, an open society, one with free speech, and with a constitution and a democracy, and the other is just gone off the rails. And lastly, I did want to say this too, and I think William, you felt this as well because of course we talked about it. You'd run into a bunch of people like remember we were on with the people who were golf lobbyists, literally GOLF lobbyists, right? Okay, they're fun. They're almost certainly there to meet with the Republicans, right? And we were there with a few other kind of like classical Republican Party lobbying types. And you talk baseball, and you connect with them, and as you said about them. But then we would sometimes encounter just a few times, right? We I think we brushed up against some people who really seemed to be more on the kind of we're on the take with the Trump administration type of people, and you get a chill
Yeah.
when you realize you're close to those guys. Yeah.
You can immediately tell, almost like, to use the terminology that Ilhan Omar's office used multiple times, the vibes around these individuals immediately. The aura is just different. There was the story of the individuals that we ran into on the elevator. I've told to my friends multiple times, bragging about the vice president coming to for
Right.
their massive fundraiser that night, and how their buddy from the fraternity that he was in back in college at a major state school in the Deep South is going to be connecting him with this, wealthy, powerful individual. And what was interesting is they were nice people in the sense that Alan and I asked for instructions as
Right.
to how to get to the
Yeah.
cafeteria, and they were
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, bro, just follow me, bro."
Even in that, though, even that, one of them was nicer than the other two.
Yes, but you can tell by the way that they carried themselves and by the events that they were attending that night and the conversation that we listened into on the elevator. Yeah, it was eavesdropping, but you don't really have a choice when you're standing there and they're essentially yelling. Is that they're not kind. They might be nice to your face, but there's a big difference between being nice and being kind. And it was seeing the dichotomy of Capitol Hill and having all of these individuals in such close proximity. When each individual office is essentially their own company. They work independent of each other. They can have very different rules and set pieces and regulations. But it was it really was a powerful learning experience, and I was so inspired to see the amount of respect really that these offices had for PDA. Both the work that PDA has done in the past, the work that we are doing right now, and the work that they're expecting to do with us in the future. Because it wasn't just saying, well, what are you going to do from here on out? It was, what are we going to do? How can we do this together? How can our office support the work that you are doing? And to hear that is it really just it was really powerful for me.
Well, thank you for that. And yeah, that was my sense as well. Um, and again, look, there's so many people on this call right now who have contributed to that. So I thank all of you for being here, and so many of you, and many other people who aren't on the call right now, from PDA's broader family. And as I mentioned, by the way, obviously with this kind of legislative agenda, some of which clearly is going to go forward. And if 2/3 of it, it'll be the largest sort of legislative initiative I think PDA has ever been involved in helping lead. If it's all of it, it'll be just mind blowing and great, of course, for all of us to see it come to fruition in that form. But there's going to be the need to relaunch our congressional liaison program. We'll be doing that in the coming weeks. So I'd love to take have William and myself take questions. I'm still a little worried I'm going to drop William, so be prepared to take over. Mickey Leader, you're up first, and as your name suggests, you might be. So and Melissa second, and Mickey, what's on your mind?
Hi, I had to find where it was and actually see to unmute. What's on my mind is much of what you said. I think it's great that you were um, up close and personal with all those people. But one of the things that we're seeing here in Rockland County is nobody is communicating that the lieutenant governor is going to show up this week, and it's the first time I've ever seen anything on any email. So we really have to get people to spread their information better, because one of the gals in the northern part of the county was carrying on like a lunatic that she's a member of Indivisible, she's a member of Democratic Party. I'm a member of the Democratic Party. Nobody told us nothing about 10 days ago Lieutenant Governor was going to be here. Mike Lawler is getting the stones thrown verbally and figuratively, but he's still looking to become governor in 26. And I just found out there's actually 3 people running for New York 17. And that's so damn stupid that 3 Democrats are fighting like hell when we could easily, with one very strong one, win New York 17. So that's what I'm thinking. And
Yeah.
also, they're going after everything that we all know that it's storm and drang. We all know that they're trying to overwhelm us, but I physically don't know how all of us, you do a great job, PDA. How are we going to conquer everything? Taking the funding away from everything.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
Well, one of the things, okay, thank you for that, because you point to something that we're thinking of here within the PDA Brain Trust, which relates initially to what we're talking with Jamie about, which is a resolution along the lines that tracks all of the damage being done to the Constitution by the Trump administration and promises is a resolution that can be signed on to in Congress and then to be adopted again. You know, by the way, for people who don't understand, I was about to say to be adopted by the Democratic Party. And what is it? A resolution to make the Constitution whole again, right? And that also goes towards all of the essential services of the government that Trump is destroying. And that, of course, extends to the damage being done to civil society organizations by the way that Trump is destroying the supportive components for those civil society institutions. By the way, you know, I'm not the happiest person in the world. You know, in debates on the left, for people who don't know this about me and as the E of PDA, and of course, if ever people think this is wrongheaded for PDA, please let me know. Of course, we need to support the 501c3, the attack on the 501c3 tax structures that is pending. We know that Trump and the IRS are going to try to go after the tax deductible donations made to the organizations they loathe, but also try to do it in a way to damage the left. And I have been a critic that too much of the left is organized around, sometimes I refer to it as the, I forget in one of the military industrial complex. So it's the sort of nonprofit industrial complex. And the reason is because oftentimes I don't want to use precise examples, but okay, I'll be vague then. There was a prominent billionaire who was a candidate in the 2020 Democratic primaries. You might remember him. That supported a lot of left-wing infrastructure and organization. And, you know, when he didn't get the nomination, you know, obviously who knows what happened in his life, the pandemic hit, et cetera. But within about a year's time, that funding was gone, and all these people who were employed by this organization were no longer employed. That's not the way a progressive left should be organized. And not surprisingly, as the head of PDA, I believe, and that people, of course, think I'm naive, that ultimately what we work for is to have so much of that energy be inside the one political party that will represent the people. So it'd be the Democratic Party. And, you know, even PDA, which sort of needs to exist to reform the Democratic Party and turn it into something that's nothing like what it is now, but a truly functional political party. That would be better than relying upon, you know, wealthy donors to sustain the civil society organizations that represent the progressive left. But that doesn't mean we don't have to stand in solidarity with all of those organizations and demand that what Trump does when he damages them get reversed. So, again, that still goes to reforming the Democratic Party. We need the Democratic Party to do things like we're going to make the Constitution whole again. We're going to, you know, rebuild the essential public services that Trump is destroying and the ways in which he's destroying the way those civil society organizations operate. So it's a lot, Mickey. Thank you for bringing it up in that way. It's a ton. But it is certainly something that I think the Democratic Party, and, you know, we're now taking a leadership role in directing them towards that kind of clarity of vision along those lines. Okay, that was long. Let's go to Melissa, and then William, you can respond in the next round, but let's hear from Melissa because I was so long-winded there. Melissa, you're up. Please unmute.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I greatly agree with what William said about they're coming after all of us. However, who in both of your opinions could be similar? I'm terrified of somebody taking over the Democratic Party the same way that the Republican Party was taken over, and what can be done to stop all this, you know, not what he's doing, but what's to stop this from happening to some other party.
It's always a risk in a democracy, demagogues, there's no doubt. William, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fabulous question because I think there are, like, looking at it from 30,000 feet and taking my personal political beliefs out of it, I think Republicans could argue that Bernie / AOC is that for the Democratic Party. Now, it's because Republicans are kind of brainwashed by, you know, Fox News and right-wing propaganda, but they kind of see this, these singular powerful leaders that are changing the superstructure of the parties as bad when it's against you, good when it's with you. as Alan noted, that's kind of that's always at the back of your minds in a democratic society. It's always possible that singular entities that are so charismatic and so influential get to a point where they're able to single-handedly remake a party in their image. You know, an organization like PDA and me personally, in this hypothetical, would love if the Democratic Party was reimagined in the form of Bernie Sanders or AOC. That would be incredible. But I can imagine how someone, you know, a Republican who would immediately label that socialism or some other terminology that they don't truly understand could use that as a negative or a threat against us. So I think the answer is always going to come back to these type of community organizing efforts. When you have strong local structures, particularly in place, it's a lot harder for national issues to prop themselves or usurp that kind of influence that has long been established, long been built. To give you an example, you know, my grassroots community in my little hometown, we've been in existence since 2008. So we're almost more powerful at this point in time than the county party for the Democrats. But that I wish I had a better answer for you, Melissa, because it really is always a possibility. We need to continue fighting against it every day because I forgot who said it, but you know, democracy is not a noun; it's a verb, and protecting it requires an organized defense of it day after day, year after year, decade after decade.
Mike Fox, thank you so much. And Mike Fox, thank you, Melissa, as always. And Mike Fox, if you could step up with our top of the hour updates, but no, if you can be as brief as possible, because you're going to be coming back in 24 minutes when I have to slip away.
All right, being brief. Thank you to the following people who have donated today. Thank you, Peter, Phone Banker Beverly, doing double dipping as always. Thank you, Beverly. And Jean, Amy, Jane, George, Charles, Kathleen, Phone Banker Lois, double dipping, and Kathleen in Vermont. We have two Kathleens. And Shirley out in Oakland, and Phone Banker Betsy, double dipping, Dr. Deutsch, Neil, Aaron, Carl, Margaret, Debbie, Phone Banker Erica out in Arizona, double dipping. Valerie, Michelle, Phone Banker Mary, Michael, Phone Banker Aaron. Look at all them phone bankers double dipping. Thank you, phone bankers. You rock. Silva, Phone Banker Jane, double dipping. Dr. Sonnenborn, as always, double dipping. Michael Neal, double dipping. Jason, thank you so much. Bob, Andrea, and finally Michael, who starts us off every single week. Thank you so much, Michael. All right, gang, that's a good start. We're still short on goal for the day. Thank you to everyone likewise who has signed up for a volunteer shift. We're still 9 volunteer shifts short of goal. So I'm going to toss into the chat right now the 2 links to make either or both of those things happen. And then when we get into family time, we'll dive more headlong into very specific to-dos that we want to get nailed before we wrap the call. Back to you, Alan.
Okay, and we're going to try to go rapid, but first we have Hartzell Gray, who is joining us. Hartzell, another member of the steering committee of Young Progressive Democrats, and he holds the title of National Coordinator of the Young Progressive Democrats of America. We usually get to see Hartzell, but you're not listed as a co-host today, so we only get to hear you. How are you doing, Hartzell?
Yo, can everybody hear me all right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, actually, it worked out okay because I'm here actually grabbing a late lunch, watch the Royals bring home the most home runs in Royals history for a single game. So it's been a good Sunday so far, Alan.
I went to the Orioles game last night with a friend after the conference. It rained for an hour, but we stayed through the whole game, which is one of the reasons I'm as exhausted as I am today. But we didn't see that many home runs for the Royals, but they won again last night, too.
They had a great day today. I'll be quick, but I also really wanted to make sure I got this in while you and Will were both on the call still. Can you break down that Manufacturing Renaissance Act? That sounds like something I really want to help champion, especially at YPDA. I think we could maybe even double down on that as well. Yeah, can you get into the weeds a little bit?
It's a complex bill, actually, and it's something I've worked on for about 5 years with a group called Manufacturing Renaissance out of Chicago, led by a sort of industrial policy strategist named Dan Swinney. And Ro Khanna, who will be the second on the bill, is actually a fan of Dan Swinney's writing. And Swinney has long called for what he calls a paradigm shift in terms of U.S. manufacturing and the organization, even of U.S. education, in terms of bringing back elements of crafts and apprenticeships through community college programs, etc. But just the way in which, especially when you have larger projects, the reality is there's a lot of players at the table that come into the determination of where these large plants get located. And what this thing does is it brings together all the civic society, business, worker organizations and brings them into manufacturing renaissance councils in metropolitan areas and regions with a small degree, not a lot, of federal funding to make sure that that jump starts it. So, okay, in some respects, if people, I don't know if people know this, in China, the Communist Party of China created competition between the regions. And it can be thought of a little bit that way. Every region of the country right now does want to see manufacturing plants come into their regions. Obviously, in certain areas, the so-called Rust Belt, it's a very, very sore point because social decline, economic decline is associated with the absence. Well, those regions have all of the infrastructure for transportation and facilitation of a rebirth of manufacturing. Other regions less so. But again, these would be developed regionally, and that's sort of the general idea. It's a complex bill, but it's actually the reality of how these things operate, and it just brings people to the table beforehand and addresses issues like education, infrastructure that go along with the necessary rebirth of manufacturing. And again, a little bit of a tip of the hat to what has been the way the Chinese have, in many respects, propelled the distribution of manufacturing across the whole country through these regional competitions. That wouldn't be the same thing, but it has a little flavor of that. I hope that's enough for you, Hartzell. It's a great bill, and we'll hopefully see it go forward. Now, look, another thing that we brought forward, and I happened to actually sit in on an interview with Sherrod Brown the other day, and he is talking a lot about one of the things that's a little disturbing about the moderate wing of the Democratic Party is Trump has been going on about tariffs, as you see from the unions, including the UAW, Sean Fain.
Yes,
Tariffs aren't all bad,
I'm very
and
hopeful.
and people so fair trade and fair tariffs. Let's just say it's another one of the things that we have introduced to offices to consider legislation around. And
Alan, let me add real quick that it
yeah.
was received incredibly positively.
Right. And yes, so look forward to that too. I don't want to say too much about it again, because you don't want to get ahead of the offices. That's not really the way the dynamic, and what William says is true, is received phenomenally well. And again, PDA, just to toot our own horn here, we're out in front of this stuff. And yeah, it's a shame we don't have Sherrod Brown in the Senate right now, for sure. But Bernie Sanders is brilliant on this, so and all our progressive people are. Okay, so I saw Carly dropped off. I was going to call on Carly next. I'm sorry, Carly. Let's go to Santiago. Santiago Leon, what's up? Please unmute Santiago. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just struggling with the muting thing.
Yep.
Did you get any sense of what it's going to take to turn things around on Gaza?
Oh, wow. Of course, the JVP conference, that there were other things that were handled in the JVP conference, just talked about and discussed and thought about, but Gaza hung over everything. And a few of the meetings we had, it was present. And look, Joe Biden managed that situation terribly. Netanyahu, right? Whatever. Where I know we have a distribution of, and I want to be aware that we probably have a distribution of sentiment around the failings of the Democratic administration. But I think it's pretty fair to say that Netanyahu got his way to pursue what he was pursuing during the Biden years, the Biden period after October 7th. And nonetheless, look, it's tragic, Santiago, and that there is no capacity there's just no way that the progressive left has any dialogue with Trump on almost anything, the Trump administration. And as we know, the executive branch largely oversees foreign policy. And it's, in the way that, and of course, in this administration is totally unresponsive to Congress, other than the fact that they have the Republican majorities in lockstep with them. And so, yes, it is spoken about a lot, and the ways in which, things can be done to somehow staunch the death and destruction, but the despair that hangs over the issue with the Trump administration at the reins, the inability to influence them, clearly we all know whatever criticisms we may have of Biden and Harris as a president, then in a campaign, it would not be as dire on that issue as on almost every other issue we can all imagine if Trump had been defeated. So that's sort of the situation there in terms of the reality of being on Capitol Hill. As for JVP, of course, beautiful sense of solidarity for peace and regeneration. Carly is back on stack. So, I mean, did I get that right? Sort of, William, did you sense that there was any kind of opening for any kind of influencing of the Trump administration on anything, let alone Gaza?
I agree with that completely. And in fact, I'll even take it a step further. We heard from numerous offices, essentially, that every single committee now, Republicans aren't even bothering to discuss amendments or motions. They might as well just, do the old elementary school, pretend to zip the lips, sit there, smile, wait for everything to go through. And once it comes to a vote, they're just going to vote down party line over and over and over again. So really nothing is getting done that the Republican Party, as they know they can do because they won a majority. That's what happens. Elections have elections have consequences. Those are the results of the 2024 elections. They feel very confident in their position that it doesn't feel like there's much that we can do against it.
But I would add too, both at JVP and in the offices that we met with, the ones a few the subject didn't come up. But I mentioned the 7 offices plus Bernie, and actually, I think all 8 of those offices would very strongly agree with what I'm about to say. The Democratic Party had better understand that it has to come up with a policy that it produces the end of the slaughter, and let's just maybe just leave it at that, right? That if they don't, they're going to lose elections because there is a significant part of the Democratic Party base that is, of course, massively disgusted at a party that refuses to stand ethically against something this catastrophic. Would you agree with that, William?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah. Carly, glad to see your hand back up. Sorry if I sometimes go out of order, but I'm always going to try to, of course. And I know people say that, and I apologize we don't have a woman guest this time, but
I wanted to ask about how they were going to
voices.
counterattack on RFK's anti-autism comments, given last month was Autism Empowerment Month, and being autistic myself, there is zero excuse for that kind of behavior. I'm all for a healthier food supply, but can't that guy learn to shut up and leave the neurodiversity community alone? What's your take on that?
Their offensiveness to so many communities is so off the charts. Go ahead, William, your thoughts?
Oh, I was going to let you handle it, but I did want to just add that truth be told, RFK didn't come up a whole lot in any of our conversations. I think it's, for a lot of individuals, he's just the icing on the, I don't want to swear, but I don't know how else to say this, the shit cake that is the Trump administration. It's just one incompetent and frankly grotesque individual in an important position after another. Alan, I don't know if that was part of the conversation you might have had with Misty when I wasn't there, but
No, it did come. But I think you captured the sentiment correct, and
we just
yeah.
can't have vermin like RFK screwing around. He's got to learn to leave the neurodiversity and autism community alone. It's high time, and I have every intention of saying this if I were to testify. Those who don't live within this world need to learn to shut up, F off, and let us call the shots. It's not that hard.
No, I couldn't agree with you more, Carly. And that's actually spot on
Mhm.
what you're saying. And yeah, it's offensive and it's horrible. And unfortunately, with the Republicans in Congress in utter lockstep. Okay, I'm sorry for the long-winded responses, but as this all has so much dimension. Look, I went into the week mildly boosted up by the results of a New York Times poll, and I try not to give the Times too much credit, but they did a good poll on the 100th day, and it had this one statistic that was the most promising thing I'd probably seen, which is that only 6% of the population in the poll agreed with the idea that Trump should go against the rulings of the Supreme Court. Also, we saw election results in Canada and now Australia, where clearly populations are turning against the authoritarian right. Now, this is sadly, look, folks, this is good, and it shows that people want to live in constitutional democratic republics. They do not want to have the Orbanification, Putinification of their societies. However, the real danger exists in a moderate Democratic Party that, if it wins back power, does nothing to improve the lives of the population, does nothing. Look, we as Democrats do have to, and it's not a polemic against the moderate Democrats. It's simply facts. The Obama administration produced more fossil fuel production and increase in fossil fuel production. Just look at the statistics on it. It's off the charts in the Obama administration. So climate change isn't being addressed. Wealth disparity isn't being addressed by the moderate Democratic Party. And when that happens, an all change in the society for an unsatisfied population is ceded to the fascist right. The fascist right are going to come back again. And that's true in Canada. That's true in Australia. It's worse here, of course, because generally, the Labour Party in Australia, even the Liberals in Canada, they're defending a social democratic governmental structure that's much more healthy than it is here. So, yeah. Anyway, William, thoughts on that? Then we go to Neil. William?
I mean, I would say that answered exactly as I would have as well.
Thank you. Neil Penn, you're up. Please unmute.
I agree with everything you, Alan, and William are saying, and I appreciate your feedback from your visit to DC. You're absolutely right that it isn't simply replacing Republicans with corporate Democrats, it's replacing them with real progressives. The AOC and Bernie tours have been drawing record crowds in red districts. And for reasons that don't require elaboration, there's a tremendous amount of voter regret and sense of betrayal among non-wealthy Americans who foolishly voted for Trumpy boy. In response to that, an organization called Activate America is targeting red communities with postcards that are basically speaking about their concerns of getting shortchanged and capped, and inviting them to write to their Republican legislators to turn up the heat. I was wondering what you and William thought of that as one of many strategies.
It's a great strategy. I don't know about the organization, and maybe, the staff and Mike and Donna and Deb and Alan can look into that. And William and YPDA people can too with the organization itself. But we should do it ourselves too, because we're going to be doing that with the Congressional Liaison Program. And I mean, my God, though, the Republicans, again, they're not responding to the Democrats in their own committee. They're not having town halls. Um, the downside to the polling against Trump now is the strength of his support among Republicans remains pretty good. And that's largely what he's responsive to. And even more, that's largely what the congressional Republicans are responding to. William?
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing in Wisconsin in particular, as an example, the Fighting Oligarchy Coalition is hosting town halls in Republican districts, similar to what Bernie has been doing. And we have seen good turnout. I don't want to say great turnout, because obviously you always wish you would have more people show up to these events. But it really hasn't changed the Republican officials' approach in any way, shape, or form. My official, Scott Fitzgerald, in the 5th CD of Wisconsin, he held a town hall about a month and a half ago. Extensive turnout. It made national news. It was covered by Rachel Maddow. It was covered by CNN. It was covered by Fox News. That was kind of the launching point for a lot of those Republicans that are getting berated at their own town hall stories that we saw for a few weeks stretch. But then how did the Republicans respond? They decided to just stop hosting town halls. So of course, while we can hold our own events, so many Americans are so apathetic to an electoral system that in their mind hasn't done anything to help their material conditions in decades that they don't care which side of the aisle is either assisting or failing to assist, at least now. Perhaps if some of the stories that we're hearing about supply chain disruption, empty cargo ships littering the coasts of America, if that comes to fruition and in a few weeks grocery stores are starting to run out of supplies, then public narrative will shift very quickly. But like Alan mentioned, I don't think Trump and his Republican allies give a damn what anybody outside of their voters and their donors have to say about any of this. And even then, I mean, we saw with the Republican town halls where they were getting shouted down by their own constituents, that didn't change anything except assist their decision to stop holding town halls.
So I am going to be running off to an event in a few minutes at Tim Disney's house. That is an heir to the Disney fortune, legacy, etc. And it has 15 members of Congress who are attending. And William and Mike Fox can continue with the stack, or it's up to Mike to decide how to proceed. Certainly, let's close the stack. But first, I want to introduce John Stanley to everybody. And please unmute John. Because I sit here in Southern California for 4 days now. And then I get back on a plane, which I shouldn't be flying around so much because it's terrible for the environment. And I will be joining William Walter in his home state of Wisconsin for a few events, but foremost among them is the Wisconsin Grassroots Network. And the chair of the Progressive Caucus of the Wisconsin Democratic Party is a lead organizer of the Wisconsin Grassroots Network annual event, and he is John Stanley. John, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Alan, and thank you. I was actually had a question for you about your trip. Thanks for giving a nod to the 60th Annual Grassroots Festival in Wisconsin. But my question is, most people, when they think of DC, they think of the legislature, they think of, the president. But did you guys have any opportunities to meet with any lobbyists and lobbyists can be good guys. My grandfather was a lobbyist for PBS, for instance, or any of the groups like Crew or Legal AF that are doing work trying to go against Donald Trump.
Well, generally, we coordinate not so much with lobbyists. Generally, we have coordinated with other grassroots lobbying efforts or from allied organizations as we've teamed up. And of course, the primary group that were in coordination with on this trip were National Nurses United and the Medicare for All Roundtable Group. And the nurses actually, the day of the press conference, then swung around to Senate offices. Of course, they had great success in the Senate. 16 senators for the first time signed on. But no, not specifically along the lines of what you described. And you're right, of course, there are some benign lobbyists. And among them were William Walter and I, because there's no doubt what we were doing was lobbying. And we were doing it under, of course, the guise of our 501c4 with the initials PDA as well, Progressives for Democracy in America. So we're surrounded by lobbyists when we're up there. We sure as heck know that. William, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have not been referring to our trip as lobbying because of the negative connotations, but yeah, by definition, that's what we were doing. And I like to think that we were the only, not the only, but some of the only altruistic lobbyists there because we were arguing for something on behalf of all working class Americans rather than our personal or private interests. We did meet with one group that is focused on pushing more progressive candidates across the country against incumbents. which was a very fruitful conversation in my opinion. That was off campus.
That was off Capitol Hill, right? Yeah.
But on Capitol Hill, no, we did not have any set meetings with any lobbying groups outside of our conversation with the Maine Chamber of Commerce. But that was a lunchtime baseball conversation, not so much a lobbying effort.
Yeah, and by the way, when we were up there talking to the offices, we were talking specifically about our proposals for legislation and public policy, as lobbyists should do. And we did not have conversations about anything relating to electoral strategy or campaigns at all. That's a firewall that we respect. And if we are to meet with, of course, obviously sitting elected officials are likely to run for reelection, and we discuss with them their plans for reelection. That takes place off of Capitol Hill and is done under the guise of our 527, which is Progressive Democrats of America. And look, I have to go. I am trying to find the list of the people. I know it's Mark Pocan and Mark Takano and Becca Balint and Richie Torres. Not the biggest Richie Torres fan. And Robert Garcia and 10 other members of Congress, including Susan Del Bene, who's there in her capacity as the head of the DCCC at this event at Tim Disney's. So I'm going to shave, get on my nice clothes, and head over. And it's a hard out for me right now. So
Yeah,
William,
wrap the recording, Alan, and then we'll move on.
okay, yeah, continue. Don't leave the stack, everybody. Mike and William will decide how to proceed. But again, that is the recorded part of our town hall for today, May 4th, 2025. And thank you for everybody. Very exciting days at PDA. And we'll see you next week with another PDA Town Hall. Mike Fox and William Walter, take it away.